I have been privileged to spend my life helping people who want to be exceptional. A desire to be exceptional may not in itself strike you as unusual. Everyone as a kid has daydreams in which he catches the touchdown pass as time expires to win the Super Bowl, or she pole vaults 16 feet to win an Olympic gold medal. But I'm not talking about daydreams or about the unrealized fantasies of many adults. I'm talking about a desire so fierce that it changes a person's life. Exceptional people begin with such ambitions. From them, I've learned how a champion's thoughts are different from the thoughts of most people. The difference is what this book is about. I've worked with the winners or 84 major golf championships of the men's and women's and senior tours. I've worked with Olympic gold medalists in the equestrian sports. I've worked with NCAA champions in track and field, soccer, lacrosse, and basketball. I've worked with winners of major tennis tournaments, 3 of 5 players in the history of the PGA Tour to shoot a competitive 59 Chip Beck, David Double, and Jim Furyk were working with me when they did it. I've worked with exceptionally successful people in the entertainment and business worlds. Each of them has taught me something about the minds of exceptional people. They have confirmed my belief that the ideas people choose to have about themselves largely determine the quality of the lives they lead. We can choose to believe in ourselves and thus to strive, to risk, to persevere, and to achieve, or we can choose to cling to security and mediocrity. We can choose to set no limits on ourselves, to set high goals and dream big dreams. We can use those dreams to fuel our spirits with passion, or we can become philosophers of the worst kind, inventing new ways to rationalize our failures. Inventing excuses for mediocrity, we can fall in love with our own abilities and our own potential, then choose to maximize those abilities, or we can decide that we have no special talents or abilities and try to be happy being safe and comfortable. As I've worked, I've been troubled at times by the realization that the champions I know are becoming more atypical to exceptional, if you will. Our grandparents and great-grandparents migrated and struggled for many years to give us the freedom we now have, a precious birthright. We are free to choose what we are going to think about ourselves. No one can stop us from chasing our dreams, yet many people today choose to squander this birthright. They choose to believe that because of where they were born or who their parents are, they don't have a fair chance in life. They are choosing to believe that the competition from America and around the world is just too tough. They are choosing to believe in someone else's talent more than their own. They're choosing to be mediocre. I'm always telling people that I don't care what their families or their school or the community said or thought about them. I tell them, you're an adult now. You get to decide. So what's the decision going to be? You get to write your life story. Will you be heroic or just someone trying to get by? Will you be the star or someone sitting at the end of the bench? I have no trouble with someone who strives to be the best and finishes in the middle of the pack. There is honor in that. I don't see that person as a failure. To the contrary, he will come to an end of his days with a smile on his face, because he spent the time and talent God gave him having a ball, finding out how good he could get it. He will not be the person who goes to the grave thinking, if I only had been as talented as, say, LeBron James, my life would have been great. In fact, such person doesn't have an inkling of the most important talent LeBron James has. Nor does he know how he could have chosen to have that talent himself. I know because I've heard about it from the source. Some years ago, I got a call from Lance Blanks, who was then assistant general manager of the NBA's Cleveland Cavaliers. I had known Lance since his days as a basketball player for the University of Virginia, where I taught and helped the athletic program as a sports psychologist. Lance wanted to know if I would spend a day talking with LeBron. Then, and now again. The cornerstone of Cleveland's franchise, I was happy to say yes. I knew something about LeBron, of course. I knew the outer dimensions. He was 6'8", weighed 250 chiseled pounds, and had explosive speed. I knew he had been perhaps the most publicized high school basketball player since Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was known as Law in Alcindor. I knew he had been the NBA's #1 draft choice the year he finished high school, and I knew he had been a very successful professional for the couple years. But until I had a chance to talk to him, I didn't know the most important thing about LeBron. I want to be the greatest basketball player in history, he told me. Beautiful. I thought this is a truly talented guy. It was not that he had the physical gifts, it was LeBron's mind. I've been encountering his kind of attitude on occasion for more than 3 decades. And when I have encountered it, I have almost had the pleasure of working with someone truly exceptional. One of my first clients in this category was someone who could hardly have been physically more different from LeBron, professional golfer Pat Bradley. Pat had average size and average club head speed, nothing about her initial appearance which suggests athletic ability to most people. And that was not even the most significant difference. LeBron had been a prodigy of whom much was expected at the time he was maybe 14 years old. Pat had grown up in golfing obscurity. She was a girl from New England, which is not a crowd of golfers because of the short golf season up north. She hadn't gone to one of the colleges that traditionally has a strong women's golf team. LeBron would have disappointed a lot of people if he hadn't made himself into a great basketball player. But had she been mediocre, would only have confirmed people's expectations. When I met her, she had been a professional golfer for 11 years, and she had won one tournament. I asked her about her dreams and goals. Almost definitely, Pat said she wanted to win the LPGA Player of the Year award. She wanted to have the tour's lowest scoring average. She wanted to win all of the women's major championships, and she wanted to make the LPGA Hall of Fame. At the time, an LPGA player had to win 30 tour tournaments, including 2 majors, to be eligible for the Hall of Fame. It was the highest Hall of Fame hurdle in sports. She asked me if I thought she could do these things. I said, I don't know if you can do them, but I'm excited to work with someone who has your dreams. In the next 10 years or so, Pat achieved all of those goals, so I certainly didn't discourage LeBron from thinking he could be the greatest. I just asked him where he thought he stood with regard to that goal. Sometimes when I ask a client this kind of question, I will get a response that indicates a troubled mind. A golfer might say that he's got the yips with his putter or his wedges. A singer might say she has stage fright. A business person might say that he's freezing up when he makes sales calls. Initially, LeBron's response was less about his mind than about his skills. I'm pretty damn good, LeBron said, but I'm not going to become the greatest basketball player in history if my teams don't win championships. And my teams aren't going to become champions if I don't become a better three-point shooter. It tends to be forgotten now, but LeBron was not a finished player when he entered the NBA. He made only 29% of his three-point attempts in his rookie season. Right now, when I get into the playoffs, other teams know that I can't make the three, so they won't even guard me. They just look at me and talk trash to me and say, go ahead and take it. We know you can't make it, and you know you can't make it. I wasn't surprised to hear that opposing players would talk trash with LeBron or thought that it would bother him. I've worked with enough athletes to know that the godlike images we are fed by the media can often disguise reality. Superstars have doubts and fears, just like the rest of us. So I nodded and LeBron went on. I started to think a little bit of my freeze, he acknowledged. You know, I have some doubt about it. Yes, I knew. In basketball, as in golf, as in almost any sport involving motor skills, an athlete gets the best result when he doesn't think. Once an athlete has learned a skill, and LeBron had learned to shoot a basketball, he needs to trust the skill. Focus on the target and let the shoot go without thinking about how to do it or being concerned about the result. Which is why confident shooters are better than shooters who lack confidence. A great deal of my work with athletes revolves around teaching them how to keep the conscious mind inactive or quiet when they are performing. It may surprise some readers to learn that the suggestions I gave to LeBron involved a lot more of what most people perceive as plain hard work, than they involve in what most people would consider sports psychology. I did tell him that I thought he could benefit from one of the standard methods of sports psychology, visualization. I wanted him to see himself making three-point shoots. I suggested that he ask the Cavaliers staff to make a highlight video for him about 8 to 12 minutes long. This video would be a LeBron James long-range shooting montage. It would have been LeBron making threes off the dribble. It would show LeBron catching the ball and making threes, spotting it up. It could have some of LeBron's favorite music in the background, helping him to attach the good feelings associated with that music to the act of shooting threes. He would watch it every night as he fell asleep. He could conjure up images of himself making three-point shots against tall, quick, tenacious defenders. He He could let them fill his dreams. All of this would help him improve his 3-point shooting because it would feed the right sorts of images to his subconscious, helping him become a more trusting, confident shooter. But if improvement were as easy as watching videos, the NBA would have a lot of more great 3-point shooters. It isn't. The mental game is a big part of sports, but it must be combined with physical competence. So I suggested the LeBron hire a shooting coach and work with that coach every day. I told him he needed to make maybe 200 3-point shots off the dribble every day, imagining the best defender in the league guarding him. I told him he needed to make another 200 catch and shoot 3-pointers. I told him he didn't care. I told him I didn't care how many shots it took to make those 400 3-pointers, or how long it took. If he wanted to be great, he would find the time and find the energy. The actual number of shots I suggested was not as important in my mind as the idea that LeBron would set a practice goal for himself, commit to achieving it every day, and wait patiently for results. I told him patience was essential because I had no way of predicting how long it would take to see improvements in his shooting statistics if he took my suggestions. But the patience and tenacity required were factors that could help him separate himself from his peers. A lot of athletes might undertake an improvement regimen, like the one I suggested to LeBron, but not many would stick with it. After a few weeks, if they weren't seeing immediate results, they would find a reason to quit. Maybe they would decide the extra practice was wearing them down. Maybe they would decide that they just didn't have the talent to be a great outside shooter. They had found a way to walk themselves out of it, to encourage LeBrons to persevere. I told him about my belief that great basketball shooters, like great golfers and great baseball hitters, are for the most part made rather than born. He and Pat Bradley had hard work in common. Pat didn't make it to the LPGA Tour Hall of Fame just because she wanted to. She used the desire to fuel hours and weeks and years of dedication and practice. Her dreams were her starting point. With LeBron, I also talked about Bill Russell and Michael Jordan, and like golf, basketball is a team game. An essential part of being a great player is, in my mind, playing and conducting yourself in ways that make your teammates better. That, far more than scoring average, is the hallmark of a truly great player. Jordan and Russell were the players LeBron was chasing. Because in addition to being a great individually, they were players whose teams won many championships. They were great leaders. I suggested that LeBron read about Russell and Jordan and talked to them about leadership whenever he had the chance. I was very impressed with LeBron James. He was attentive. He asked insightful questions. It was clear that he was disciplined and that he set very high standards for himself. He was more than just a superstar, he was a very coachable athlete on the mission to see how great he could become. I gave him the best suggestions I did, because I knew that his desire to be the best would empower him. The way he chose to think about himself would drive him through the workouts, the visualization exercises, and all of the other things he needed to do improve. That's why the way he saw himself was his most important talent. I have noticed a few things since I spoke with LeBron. One is that his 3-point shooting has improved dramatically. It's now roughly 40%, a 1/3 improvement over his rookie year. And I noticed, of course, that he switched teams, giving himself a better chance to win championships. And I have no doubt that the success LeBron has enjoyed due to his kind of hard work we talked about that day, to his dedication to improvement, and to his strong commitment to team success. True superstars shared this attitude. Not long after I worked with LeBron, I met the University of Memphis basketball team, then coached by John Calipari and led to on the floor by All-American Derrick Rose. I shared with the players how important I thought that LeBron's attitude was in his success. A little while later, I got a call from Derrick and he had something he wanted to tell me. Doc, I want to be the greatest basketball player in history, he said. Derrick went on in 2011 to become the youngest MVP in the history of the NBA. He has suffered some devastating injuries in the last few years, and he is still working very hard to complete his rehabilitation from the subsequent knee injuries. But if he does manage to heal fully, I would advise LeBron and anyone else in the NBA to look out for him. Derrick, like LeBron and Pat Riley, has the champion's first requirement, the attitude he has chosen, the way he has decided to see himself. The vital importance of that sort of attitude is the foremost thing I've learned about exceptionalism in my decades of work, with people striving to be great. Talent, conventionally defined, is of course part of the equation. As Bear Bryant once said, "When was the last time you saw a jackass with a Kentucky Derby?" But there are many people with physical talent, just as there are many people with raw intelligence. Venture that most people are talented in something, whether they realize it or not. What sets merely talented people apart from exceptional people can't be measured by vertical leap, or time for the 44-yard dash, or length of the T, or IQ. It's something internal. Great performers share a way of thinking, a set of attitudes and attributes like optimism, confidence, persistence, and strong will. They all want to push themselves to see how great they can become. These attributes and attitudes cause champions to work harder and smarter than other people as they prepare for competition. They help them to stay focused under pressure and to produce their best performances when the stakes are highest. I'm hardly the first observer to notice this. In the book of Ecclesiastes, it was written that the runner with the best food speed doesn't always win the race, and the strongest warrior doesn't always win the battle. That knowledge persisted into the 20th century, but the reasons behind it remained obscure. Good coaches pondered it. When I was a kid, I loved to hang out with such coaches. I had a cousin, Sal Soma, who was the football coach for many decades at the New Dorp High School in New York. There was a street named for him near the high school. He was a friend and disciple of Vince Lombardi, whose coaching career began not far from the New Dorp, at St. Cecilia High School in Englewood, New Jersey, when Sal would visit in Vermont during school vacations. And when I sat and talked with other coaches, I became aware of the distinction between the practice player and the gamer. Coaches like Sal love to talk about what distinguished practice players, the failed runner with the best foot speed and of the failed warrior with the greatest strength, from gamers. They knew that winning depended on identifying and developing gamers, and they tried to intuitive ways to do it. They might run pushing preseason practices in the summer heat, counting on the practice players to quit and the gamers to identify themselves by their tenacity. They might try pep talks. They might try paper their locker rooms with messages about hard work and dedication. John Wooden, during a career that started in the 1920s, thought long and hard about the nature of success and developed a pyramid of success that he taught of to his UCLA basketball teams. All of those things might work, especially in the hands of the master coach and recruiter like Wooden, who won the NCAA championships, or they might not work at the time the term sports psychologist had yet to be coined. And in fact, a lot of great athletes from that era, if asked, didn't think it needed to be coined. I remember some of years ago, my friend Jim Lefebvre, the great ex-Dodger infielder, big league manager, and hitting coach, introduced me to Bob Gibson, the Hall of Fame pitcher in the 1960s and 1970s for the St. Louis Cardinals. When Jim told Gibson what I did for a living, Gibson looked at me and think I was an approximation of the scornful glare he used to direct at hitters. We didn't need sports psychology when I was playing, he said. Why was that, I asked. Because when I was playing, if anyone ever thought about digging in at the plate, I would hit him in the head. That was my sports psychology. Chapter 2, Learning to be Optimistic. I had a privileged upbringing. It wasn't that the Rotella family had a lot of money, we didn't. We were never hungry, but a lot of food on our table consisted of vegetables we grew ourselves. When I say I was privileged, I mean that my childhood taught me to be optimistic. I didn't know it then, but I realize now that was a precious gift. Exceptional people I have found either start about being optimistic or learn to be optimistic because they realize that they can't get what they wanted without being optimistic. That's why I say I was privileged. I didn't have to learn optimism, it was given to me. I don't mean that my mother and father, in the manner of some days parents, are ever worried about my self-esteem. They didn't prize me unless I did something prize-worthy. To the contrary, if I did less than my best at something, I got no credit for making a half-hearted effort. If my chore for the day was cutting the grass and I didn't complete the job with neat edges, I did it over when my dad came home. I remember a day when I was working with my father to fix some window trim. I was nailing it in, and I hit a nail incorrectly and bent it. I was about to just pound the bent nail in it, but when you bend a nail, the sound is quite different from that of nail being stuck properly and driven in straight. My dad was about 10 years away, and he heard it. Before I could continue, he came over to me and said, "What are you doing? You think we are going to paint over a bent nail? That's going to be your finished product. How can you live with that?" I pulled out the bent nail and started over. My dad believed patiently and still believes in education. It was an attitude he got from his father and the community he grew up in. He taught me that America is a great place for anyone who gets an education and takes advantage of it. He insisted that we do as well as possible in school. That usually meant A's.